Welcome to World Travel Made Easy with Itinerary Boss, the podcast for busy professionals who want to plan unforgettable trips without the stress. If you're craving adventure, relaxation, or cultural immersion, but feel overwhelmed where to start, this is the show for you. Each week, we dive into travel tips, expert strategies, and actionable advice to help you save time, money, and hassle while helping you design your dream trip. From group getaways to romantic escapes to adventure packed journeys and budget friendly tips, we cover it all. I'm Ross, your host and travel enthusiast, with over a decade of experience balancing a demanding career while also planning trips to over 25 cities in Europe, all over the US, Central America, the Caribbean, and beyond. I've mastered the art of stress free planning, and I'm here to help you do the same. If you love what you hear, don't forget to follow the show, leave us a review, as well as share it with a fellow traveler. I want to make your next adventure the easiest and most memorable yet. Now, on with the show. Welcome back to another episode of World Travel Made Easy with Itinerary Boss. I'm excited this week to have on Zara Atwater, and I'm bringing her on because she's an expert in the health and wellness space, the coaching, as you can see from her background. She's a confidence coach, relationship coach, and much more. I don't want to sell her short, but would love to introduce her and bring her on the show. How's it going today, Zara?
Awesome, Ross. Wonderful to be here with your listeners. I always like to say it's a pleasure to share heartbeats with you because our heartbeats are the greatest currency we have, right? We can't take them with us. And so we've got to choose what we spend our heartbeats on wisely. So it's an honor to be sharing heartbeats with you tonight.
I love that. I haven't heard that, so I'll have to put that into practice. And I appreciate you. If people haven't been watching the news as we're recording, there's a cyclone hit where Zara's at in Australia. So we appreciate her joining us and taking some time to hop on. But would love to. Like I said, I don't want to sell you short. So would love to hear just a little bit more about your background, what you do, and excited to talk more.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, thank you. Thanks for asking. I think just in a nutshell, I help people, particularly people with an anxious attachment style in relationships. So people that are trying to free themselves of that insecurity, that overthinking, and that's not just in matters of the heart, but in the professional space too. So when they're running workplace anxieties and constantly seeking validation and feeling that insecurity. So that is the kind of niche that I work in order to build up more confidence and more self-awareness and developing a better relationship with yourselves first and foremost. And it really springboarded off of my own awareness and journey into self-development and finding out for myself the kind of patterns that I was running on repeat. So yeah, so that's where I've taken my through my learning, through my own healing process, and being able to kind of be at service for yeah, that's my life's work to be at service of for other people now.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And I know when we spoke the first time, you were giving me your background and for a lot of my listeners, right, they're thinking about, okay, I want to travel, but they are
Yeah.
how does that come together is a lot of the times they are like I was a busy professional and they're sometimes either burnt out, they have maybe workplace anxiety, right? And I think now with just what COVID did. I know the loneliness epidemic is at an all-time high. So just tying all of that in, right? A lot of the times people don't realize that travel could have a big impact on that. And you're gonna tell some great stories about how it
Yeah.
did for you. And we can share some of those how it did for me. But I think that's where, for people who are maybe your first time listener, maybe you're just tuning in and wanting to know what are you guys going to cover today? And it's going to be those type of things and how do those combine? And having
Yeah.
someone like yourself will be able to help share that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a great reframe. I mean, those are the kind of people that I'm helping, but it was all sparked because of going through COVID, being in a one-bedroom unit in the east coast of Australia, in Sydney, and just feeling like I don't want to be doing this. I could be traveling and doing this anywhere because I have an online business in the coaching space. And I have a little bit of a shtick where I've traveled all over the world to go and follow solar eclipses. So wherever the solar eclipse is in the world, that's where I'll go and just check out the country, spend a few weeks or whatever there to try and, just to absorb myself into what's happening into that part of the world. And it's a great kind of yeah, I let the planet decide where I'm going to go, if you like, from the eclipse perspective. And so during COVID, and I had come out of a pretty unhealthy relationship. I looked on the NASA site, when's the next eclipse coming up? We were all in lockdown. We weren't allowed to travel anywhere. And as luck would have it, the next eclipse was in the west of Australia, the northwest of Australia in 2023, in April 2023. So I looked at the map and I kind of went, okay, I'm going to have to drive because we're not allowed to fly here. And that kind of springboarded or tail got me off onto this journey of buying a secondhand van, watching a load of YouTube videos armed with nothing more than a jigsaw and, some gumption behind me to try and give something a go. And I stripped out a van, stripped out this secondhand van, much to the surprise of my neighbours, because there was all this stuff in the back end of a garage space that we all shared. And yeah, I refitted out a van. Got to the point where I had to build all the cabinetry, and like I said, I only had a jigsaw, but it kept me occupied through COVID. It gave me something to do. I had like a project, so it was my kind of sanity marker or anchor. But like I said, when I got to the point of having to build the cupboards, the bed space, there's just no way I could do it. I could not drill a straight line with this jigsaw. And yeah, I was at what we have over here, a hardware store called Bunnings. I don't know whether you've heard of this store. It's a massive, massive Bunnings. So I was at Bunnings and there was a guy there who had a similar van, and I practically pounced on him. I was like, oh, I love the cabinetry. What have you done with the electrics? Tell me all about this. And he told me about a group, not a group, a company that was within a 5K radius of where I was living at the time that kind of did bespoke exhibition centers. They would go into exhibition centers and set up demonstration stalls, kind of really elaborate, like a Qantas plane they built one time, or they would have a big panda and all these kind of elaborate showcases at exhibition centers. I'm not sure if I'm describing that right, but that's what they would do. And so they had lost all their business through COVID. There was no exhibitions happening, no one was booking anything. So I was kind of like, would you consider, fitting out a van for me? And they'd never done a van. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to come over. And sure enough, we sat down and we looked at the plans together, and they just did the most amazing job. If anybody out there has ever tried to build a van, it's an organic thing, right? So you can't take a level measure off of any single point because you don't know whether it's on a flat surface, and it's a very, very difficult and challenging project to do. So full hats off to this group, this company that built the van for me, the cabinetry, and it was just fantastic. So, it was like a project that I'd started, so I must finish. And we got to that point where the van was all ready to go. And it was like, oh, okay, I've got to get in the van then. Here I go. So packed everything up, and yeah, the heart was pounding, saying goodbye to all my belongings into like a storage container. They took that off. I'd sold my car, I'd sold my fridge, and sold all of these belongings. And the shedding that was occurring during that week, it was all part of that process. There was definitely like, am I losing my marbles? What am I doing? Why am I doing this? What's going on? But I had a dream to go and follow the eclipse. So that's what I did. I didn't have any real agenda for how long I would be on the road for, or yeah, any places that I would go. All I knew is I could sleep in the van, and I had my kitchen set up, and I had all the things that I had needed, my bare essentials. And so, yeah, I moved into the van in August 2022. and left Sydney. Yeah, and traveled down to the south. And at that time, it was freezing cold. It was like there were people coming off the ski slopes in Canberra. So it was really, really super, super cold. And I was not prepared for the cold. So I had a massive sense of humor failure because it was just so freezing, but so just drove back up to the north. So went along the east coast and back up to the north towards the Sunshine Coast, staying with friends on the way and getting all that moral support that I needed. And yeah, eventually came down towards the most easterly point in Australia, which is known as Byron Bay, which is beautiful. I walked up to the lighthouse at Byron Bay with a friend that morning. And yeah, by the afternoon had hit the road again and went inland and literally crossed over. Yeah, I mean, I can mention all these places, but I don't know if they'll mean anything. We crossed over and I ended up doing the full lap, crossed this stretch of road called the Nullarbor, which is it means null, which is nothing, a bore, which is trees. So it's a land with no trees, and there's nothing there. It's completely dead. There is nothing growing, and there's one roadhouse that everyone kind of stays in, but it's like it's for hours and hours you're driving, and there is nothing out there. It's just massive. I'm sure you've got places like that in
Yeah.
America where you're just like nothing there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, we do a lot. And I actually have an interview with someone who focuses on the Midwest and in America, which there are a lot of flyover states, but there are some hidden gems there. So I'm excited to learn about
Yeah.
that. But I mean, a couple great points that you bring up is I think it's awesome that, like we were talking about at the beginning, I mean, COVID gave a lot of people the ability to, if you were, I mean, obviously you have an online business, so you're remote, so you have that flexibility, but a lot of people were always going to the office, and then that was a major change for
Yes.
them. So some people saw it as great, some people saw it as, and what I read online and hear is, I feel like I work more now that I'm home, where I can't really shut it off, versus I was going in 9 to 5, 8 to 4, whatever the schedule was, and then I was shutting it off. And I think a lot of people now, that's one of the challenges that has come from that. And a lot of people are busy. They're kind of expected to do more, right? They have more apps, notifications on their phone, that type of stuff. And that leads to burnout and stress. And for you, right, you were just like, hey, I'm just going to go travel and figure it out. And I think that's very cool. Like, I've never heard of, hey, each year I'm just going to follow where the eclipse is. And I'm going to let the destination pick me versus saying, here's my, top 5 bucket lists that I want to go to. And I think that's really cool. And a lot of people are always asking, like, how do you decide on which countries to visit, or how do you decide which events? Like, if you're trying to plan an event, right? It's kind of like if you want to go see something cool, that's whether it's a football match, whether it's right, the Olympics, whether it's just it could be just a concert that you're like, hey, you know what? That seems cool. Like letting that
Sure.
do
Yeah.
that, pick the destination, pick you versus saying, here's the checklist I want to go down. So I find that very interesting, and that's a question I get a lot of times from people. So that story's very inspiring. But
Yeah, thanks. I
yeah,
think just to kind of, you know, to honor the fact that it wasn't an easy decision, right? And so I don't know if any of your listeners are going through that feeling of feeling overwhelmed or feeling like they're potentially trapped or, it all sounds very nice for somebody else to go and build a van and go off traveling. It wasn't an easy decision. And yet, I'm all like I shared with you in the beginning about the heartbeats, right? I'm all about what we spend our heartbeats on. And I've been on this self-development journey, and it was about what am I choosing to spend my heartbeats on? Do I want to sit in this pokey little unit, paying exorbitant amount of rent, not really feeling happy? Or can I, sit in a pokey little van and run the same business,
yeah,
but have the landscape of Australia at my fingertips, like that be my front garden. And so it was really just a choice, and it definitely wasn't an easy choice. And I think, I would not change the journey at all, but I definitely was ignorant to what to expect. It was definitely ignorance was bliss at the time. I there are some dangerous animals out there in
Yeah.
Australia. There are things that were there were encounters I had, some fantastic things and some not so great experiences. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I would not change it for the world, but there were definitely some tough moments there, where I questioned, what am I doing? Have I done the right thing? But yeah, just kept on plodding through. Just so I think the point I'm trying to make is that don't limit yourself. You've only got one life, and that in and I say that you've only got one life, but that idea of people around me during COVID getting sick, the pandemic was really fearful. There was people kind of really questioning the time that they're spending going into work and doing that travel. And it made me question a lot of things at that time. And I think that really helped make a decision that wasn't easy. It wasn't easy, and I'm really glad that I did it. I'm not sure I would do it again at this time. It's such a massive journey. I've been on the road for 2.5 years now, so it's been a
Wow.
really big journey. And so, I break up my journey by looking after pets and people's houses. So I currently in a house. I don't know if you know, you can't see this house behind me. I'm in a house at the moment. I'm not in the van. And I look after animals while their owners go away. So that helps to break up my journey. So yeah, so it's something that I think you can hire a van. You don't have to go and build your own van, but even if it's just a weekend away, there's something really grounding about just getting your toes in the grass and just feeling the earth under your feet. I think I was reading somewhere or listening to a podcast about how all of the energy that we get from the computers and off of our phones, if we want to dissipate that, all we have to do is walk in water or walk in the grass, and
Hmm.
the will start to disperse, and we just feel more energized. We just feel more just in touch with ourselves. This cat is hassling me. I'm getting hassled by this cat.
I'll
um, yes.
I'll give you a break while they're
No, no,
they're
I think she's
hassling you.
wanting cuddles. I've given her some food, but yeah.
But yeah,
Um,
I mean, you bring up a bunch of great points. I think but a lot of the times when you take those risks, like, yeah, they're going to be scary, but then you look back and you can never really, when you look back a year, two, 5 years down backwards, you always can then be like, connect the dots and think, oh, that's why that happened. That's why I did this. This happened. But a lot of the times it is, whether it's doing what you did and, taking a van, going on that trip, or if it's just planning your first international trip, or if it's
yeah.
going out and starting a business. I mean, there's going to be so many different things going through your mind, but a lot of the times, if that's what's in your gut, it's like, do it and you're going to figure it out. And the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to learn. Well, there could be worse things, but when you're traveling, but you're going to learn different lessons along the journey. And I think that's
Well, and I think, yeah, sorry, sorry to interrupt you. I grew up in the UK, and I have always had this impetus to travel, to just go and explore. I think it might have been from living on the island and just deciding, there's Europe just over the channel there, and then you get to Europe and what else is there? It's always been in me to do that. And I'm on the other side of the world from where I was born, living in Australia now. So the idea of going and embracing somewhere new doesn't fill me with any kind of fear as much as I can only take the experiences that I'm having in life, and that's engaging with you, sharing heartbeats with somebody, sharing, a moment in nature with stuff, because it's those memories, it's those experiences that I'm going to take with me when I'm on my deathbed, when it's all over, right? I can't take that $1 million house, or I can't take that career with me. It's going to be the experiences. And so I just keep bringing it back to, what am I sharing? What am I spending my heartbeats on, because that is the greatest currency that I have. And those experiences and what I value is what's so important to me. That's how I'm living. So like I said, that doesn't mean to say that bad things can happen. Like stuff does happen, but if you're resilient enough to accept, there could be it could be risks involved. Accept those risks and just give it a go anyway. Jump and the net will appear is what I've
Yeah.
always.
Well, I mean, you would be surprised, but you wouldn't I mean, and one of the reasons I started so early is one, I wanted to, and I love travel, but two, like when I would ask people who were older in their career, right? They were in their 50s and 60s. I always asked, what are your 2 to 3 biggest regrets? Or what do you
Yeah,
wish you did more of? And it
yeah,
was
good
travel
question.
more. It was, I
Mm.
wish I invested or I started teaching myself more about financial literacy. I wish I spent more time with my family and kids. No one ever said, I wish I worked harder. I wish I
Harder,
worked more.
yes.
I wish I bought more stuff. I wish I more had more crap in my house, right? Like that no
Yeah.
one ever says that. It was always those things. And I'm like, you know what? Everyone's saying the same 2 or 3 things. So I'm going to go do those. But I think you learn a lot about exactly what you said and it just the timing with COVID. That's why a lot of people are wanting to travel more is maybe they have
Mm.
more income or they weren't spending as much or they're just like, I need to get out. But
Well, I think if
it's,
anything, I'm testament to the fact that you don't need income. Like I
yeah,
really, yes, I needed to build the van, and there was a cost involved with buying that and then getting the company to build the cabinetry. Yes, there was a cost involved, but overall, um, I think I've done over 33,000 Ks in the 2.5 years. And I did a poll on Facebook to find out, what do you think I spent more money on, repairs to the van or petrol? Like just as a go on, what do you think it would be in 2.5 years traveling around Australia? It's 33,000 Ks. What I've spent. Oh, I shouldn't have told you that. Would you think it would be more on petrol or more on repairs? Just as a quick, humor.
repairs.
Yeah, yeah, it was repairs. Yeah. So I
That's,
spent close to $16,000 Australian dollars on repairs. I needed to get a reconditioned engine. I got stranded and had to get a reconditioned engine, and then the brakes broke at some other
oh,
point. And
wow.
yeah, it's all part of the journey though. But
Yeah.
I think I spent $12,000 on petrol, 10 or $11,000 on petrol in the 2 years, the 2.5. Do you see, think how much? And I had my home, like, I stayed in campsites, but that's super cheap. And I've been staying in house sits, and running my business from the road. So it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be the big bells and whistles. If you're not if that's not everyone's cup of tea. I know some people, they don't like the camping style, or they want to have the nice hotel, and that's valid. I'm not adverse to sleeping in a beautiful hotel when I can get the
Yeah.
chance.
Well, one
But is
thing
it?
too is, yeah, I mean, I was going to say, I mean, and that's the beauty of it is when you first start traveling, I think people should stay in hostels. I think people should, right? You should experience every level because then you realize, I think one thing that people from America have just a complete misconception about is hostels. They hear the word hostel and they think of the
Mm.
movie, right? The bad movie that came out. So everyone's scared. And like, that's luckily I got to stay in those when I studied abroad when we'd go over to Europe. And it teaches you a lot where then it's like, I'll stay really, right? I'll stay where if it's an affordable place, whatever's within my budget. And I think that's where the big misconception of travel is that you have to stay in this luxurious 5-star hotel that costs significant amounts of money. And it's like, no, you just need to find something that fits your budget,
Yeah.
your needs. And if it isn't a hostel, it can be an Airbnb, it could be a hotel. One thing that I like to help people with is around rewards, points, and miles. You can use
Yes.
your everyday spending
Yes.
and strategically outline that to then pay for your hotels, your flights, things like that. So, I mean,
Yes.
that's the
Really
nice
good.
thing about it.
Yeah. And I think, it's always nice to look back and kind of go, oh, that night that we stayed in that terrible hostel where the walls were paper thin, and it felt like it was some dodgy brothel, or you could always think of what those bad experiences at the time. It might not have been so great, but in retrospect, you kind of look back and say, I got some stories to tell from that.
That's
I've had experiences. I put myself out there, and you're engaging and putting yourself in a situation where you're not going to necessarily have that experience if it's in the beautiful hotel. And
hmm
that's not to pass judgment on either or. They're both beautiful in their own way, but I think that the memories of the places that I've gone, oh my God, it's all
Yeah.
going to go play up here. Those are the ones that I remember so much because it helped me build up more resilience. I'm able to laugh at it in retrospect. And I have some great stories to tell.
Same. No, I completely agree. That's a great point, and it is funny because, like, for example, when we would go back to when we go to Europe on our group trips with six guys when we were in our 20s, like some we would be staying in hostels because half our group were teachers, and right, their income was, so we had to budget for, okay, where do we want to stay in an Airbnb and where do we want to stay in a hostel. And the memories in those hostels where it's six guys in one room and you have bunk beds, right, and it's like not a lot of room, like that's where some of the funniest memories are created, and you can look back and just laugh at those and be like, wow, we really did that. And even like studying abroad, exactly. But it builds up stories, it builds up resiliency, adversity. And I just
Sure.
went on a podcast called Journey by Jake, and he asked like, what what tell me what your definition of adventure is. And
Oh,
I
right.
gave,
Yes.
but it was a longer version of a story around, this is, when I started, when my mom put me on skis when I was younger, that then led to this. And I just find adventure as being curious, kind of like what you were talking about with following the eclipse. It's like just being curious where the next one is and not saying, I have to check all these off the list. I have to go on if I go on a 2 week vacation, I'm going to 4 or 5 cities and I'm doing everything on. It's like, no, just be curious, plan some, but also let that happen. And when, from an adventure standpoint, it's like that curiosity led to this, that led to this risk,
Yeah.
that led to this, that led to this. And then you look back and you're like, okay, skiing then allowed me to go knock on doors and cut grass, which then allowed me to do this,
Yeah.
which then allowed me to do this, which then, right? And then it's like 30 years later, you're sitting here like, okay, I'm connecting the dots here. But it was, when he asked that question, it's exactly what you just said, having those experiences. And the funniest ones are always the ones where it wasn't the 5 star top hotel, right?
Yeah.
Where, because a lot of the times when you're staying in the hostels and those other places, the people are more fun and
Yes.
carefree and right. And
Yes.
everyone's there for a good time. It's not like, people aren't sticking their nose up at you. So
Yeah,
it's,
yeah. I had this experience going to South America, and it was in 1998 to go and see a solar eclipse. I had the circumstances were relevant. I was flying over to Caracas, then over into Venezuela, and was going up towards where the line of totality is. And I hadn't really done that much research about the country, let alone the eclipse. And on the way, there was about 2 weeks out, 10 days out, caught up with some other travelers that were heading that direction, and they were all going there for the eclipse. Ended up being about 20 of us traveling towards this eclipse. We were able to hire a big coach to move us all. We ended up being in quite a big hacienda with all our hammocks and everything. And we ended up having this massive dance party in these sand dunes. And it was just the most incredible experience with these people. But what was more magical was I can't remember the exact years, but some time later, there was another one in the UK, and I had gone over to the UK, and it was the same group of people. We hadn't had
wow.
any touch with each other. The internet was just coming up, but nobody really had that happening at that point. And so, yeah, it was just incredible. It's like, wow, to be feeling like I'm part of this tribe of eclipse chasers that we're going all it was quite exciting. So yeah, it was really good. Really,
That's
really
very
fun.
cool. That is very cool. Well, I do want to, I know your business, you help people just from a confidence standpoint, from relationship, just, getting over a lot of that, like you mentioned on the beginning. I do want to learn a little bit more, so our listeners, right, can understand because from a travel perspective, I think we've touched on it from telling our stories, but I think like putting ourselves in their shoes, how a couple questions I have would just be like, if someone's just getting started out, or say maybe they're a busy professional, they've traveled a little bit around the States, but they want to maybe take that first international trip, or maybe just want to do a longer trip. Like, what advice do you have for someone who's trying to incorporate travel into their self-care routine?
Yeah, right. Nice question. I think holding an intention, keeping an intention in mind, whatever that intention is, if the intention is to follow eclipses or just to explore a new town or just for that mental well-being, hold that intention, make sure that intention is kind of going to be your North Star, like that you keep coming back to. So, the road can get a little bit bumpy. You might fall into a hole. You don't know what's going to happen. So when it gets a little bit rocky, it's good to kind of just reset and calibrate and just kind of go, okay, I'm doing this for my mental well-being, or I'm doing this because I made a promise to myself to visit 10 countries this year or 10
Yeah.
towns or something. Whatever your intention is, so hold on to that and stay true to that because then that shows integrity, right? If you're making a promise to yourself, I'm keeping this intention. Maybe it's I'm going to switch my phone off for 12 hours a day while I'm on this trip or whatever that intention is, you're going to build up some resilience because that shows a promise that you've kept to yourself. That shows real integrity that you're not going to let that down to yourself. And if you can do that to yourself, that's going to have a ripple effect within all your interactions. You're not going to be taken for granted. You're not going to be yeah, you're going to be able to trust not just yourself, but other people more because you've taken that first step in trusting yourself to hold an intention and kept the integrity on it. So that's what I always say. Even if it's a crazy intention, like following eclipses across the world, whatever it is, hold that intention true. So yeah, be clear on what your intention is and then yeah, bring awareness to how where is that intention taking you, and then let that be your star, let that be guiding you.
I love that. Yeah, no, that's great. And I think, I mean, obviously your intention is clear, right? Each year, hey, I'm going to follow an eclipse. But that's great. And that like that resonates with me so well because that's one thing that I'm always focused on is I'm planning ahead of, okay, what does next year look like? What is my intention? And one of the reasons why is in 2022, 2023, we had 9 weddings that we went to in,
Wow.
in between like the September and October and into November. And we obviously were prioritizing ourselves, but we didn't have the time to go on any trips really other than flying to this wedding, flying to that. And we wanted to support our friends. But we realized after that, we were like, okay, one, super expensive. Two, we're,
Yeah.
we're just tired and just from going here, getting home Sunday, flying out Thursday. And we said, okay, next year, let's line out where do we want to go? What do we want to do? Let's prioritize ourselves and
Yeah.
start to get in the rhythm. And that's one thing I did just to get that started was I had always taken a big trip and, a couple in between, but was okay, I'm going to surprise my fiance with a trip and we're going to go somewhere. And then making that a just tradition, but then also, okay, a lot of our year is going to be spent traveling to places that we want to go, but making that our intention and
Yes.
saying no to things that, you have to say no sometimes. And I think but a lot of people want to please everyone. And we actually just did premarital counseling. And one of the biggest challenges everyone had in there, besides us, was I have a hard time saying no to family, friends. We have to be everywhere at once. And I was like, my favorite word is no, because you have
Yeah.
to, if you want to be able to be intentional about what you're going to do. But that also means, right, intentional about if you have a close group of friends who's doing a birthday trip and everyone's starting to have kids and you're like, this might be the last one. Those are experiences that you have to say yes to. So you have to pick and choose, right? What are those experiences? What are you being intentional about? And just getting started, I think, and asking yourself, what do you like to do? And when you do travel, what experiences have you had? What don't you like? And then also reflecting on that, like you said, right? Having that awareness to then journal that and just say, this is what I liked, this is what I didn't, this is what I learned, this is what I want to take from it, and this is kind of how I want to build on it. So, yeah, everything you're saying, it's happened for me, but for others out there, like, don't think you have to take all these different trips. Like, just start with one, and it will start to snowball and compound.
Sure. And I love that sharing that you and your fiance are going on these trips. I just want to share something that reminded me of an ex-partner and I used to have this pact where we'd have a date night, right? So there were kids involved. And so, like you say, life can get in the way, families and stuff, and you just, you get swept up in it, work commitments and whatever. And so we would always have this thing once a month where we'd say, okay, this is the day. This is the day we're going to block out. And so we take it in turns. So I would take him on a date and he would take me on a date. And the only rule was that we weren't allowed to block anything. We weren't allowed to have anything else happening on that day. When we had locked it in, that was it. We gave ourselves up to the other person. And the only thing we could ask is, what do we wear? Because maybe we were going hiking and I needed to wear some shoes, or, we were going to a posh, fancy cocktail party and I needed to wear a dress. And so through that experience, it was just fantastic because we got a little bit competitive with each other. So we try and outdo each other on each date. So we went hot air ballooning, we did go-kart riding. And, this is a perfect segue because I have an ebook, which I'd love to be able to share with your listeners of 52 different date ideas, whether you're with a person in a relationship or whether you're looking for love. I've got two different books. How to have 52 different creative ways to go on a date. That's one for every week of the year. And the photos that I've got in this book are of all my trip around Australia. So if you're interested to get that, more than happy to share that with your listeners to give them some spice it up in your relationships. But if you're also single and you're looking to meet someone and you don't want to meet them on the apps, you want to go and meet someone in real life, this is another way of being able to do it. And it's like going on a little adventure, right? Just putting yourself out there. It might not be going and traveling to another country, but it's all part of that sticking your big toe in the discomfort of just getting yourself out there. And so that's 52 different ways to meet someone in real life. And it'll take you on these different adventures and just explore the town around you. And you never know, that might ignite that impulse to go and travel a little bit further afield.
I love it. That's very valuable. And to the listeners, I'll make sure to include that in the show notes. Zara shared that link, so you'll have that where you can just click it, make it easy for you. But that's great. I mean, I heard. I mean, for us, it's always trying to figure out what are right dates that we're gonna do that isn't just okay. Let's make dinner. Let's have let's make a you're right. Let's go do something fun. Obviously,
Yeah,
when you're super, if you're busy, if you're planning a wedding, if you have a lot of different balls in the air, like
sure, sure.
you want to have at least date nights, but it's someone gave us it's like 30 mini dates where you kind of pick what you want to do, but what what you have is great because it's doing something out of the ordinary. It's
Yeah,
not,
do
and I
something.
100%. And I heard something on a podcast where one of the guys was saying each year I try to do every 8 weeks, was it 8 weeks or 6 weeks? I try to do a different out of the ordinary activity with my partner.
Ah,
And that may
yeah.
be go hiking. That may be, hey, we're just going to go camp one night. Maybe that's just something just completely random. But he's like, if you do that, right, in 5 years, you would have done 30. In 10 years, you would have done 60, right? And that doesn't even include the trips. It's like those things are, if you're busy, if you just want to do something that's budget friendly, like those are smaller little trips that you can do. It doesn't have to be these big trips.
And it mixes it up, right? And
Hmm.
I remember one of the dates, he took me, I can't remember whether he took me or whether it was my date. We have this a zoo over here where you can do a roar and snore. So you can sleep in the zoo overnight
Oh,
and they'll
wow.
take you on this night tour to go and feed the nocturnal creatures. It's just fantastic. So you're sleeping inside the zoo and you've got the noises of all the animals awake in the morning. It's like you're in the jungle somewhere. That was fantastic. But that was in our town. That was just, in this country. We're not traveling too
That's
fast. There's so many things that you can do. just to mix it up, just to change the monotony of working. And if you're feeling that overwhelm, if you're feeling like you're going into burnout, get yourself out into nature. It doesn't mean it's not going to break the bank. It doesn't mean that you've got to go overseas. There are things that you can do around. And I was listening to this podcast recently, and I love this. I've been doing this quite a lot to kind of look when we look at the past, like my past self is going to set me up for my future self. And so he gave the analogy of like he'll put like a $20 or $50 note in a winter coat. And he'll just put it in the pocket and he'll forget that it's there, right? So that when his future self comes to winter and he goes to put that jacket on, he can go, oh, thanks to my past self for putting that in. Like he's grateful to his past self for doing these things. So he's setting himself up for success in little ways.
Yeah.
And so my past self, I can look back and go, wow, Zara, thanks for that, $50. Well done, you. And it's all about being grateful for the past and setting an intention for your future self of what you want, setting yourself up for the best in the future self. So I'm all about that at the moment.
I love that. That's great. I gotta take that for now that it's switching over to spring. I don't have a ton of
Yeah.
cash on me all the time, but I need to put put a
Little
$20 bill in
thing.
my jacket.
Yeah, but just that kind of just that's a little kind of reminder, wow, that was past me looking at my future intention and looking after me. And so it creates this self-love. It creates that kind of I got my back. I
Mhm.
know I can rely on me. And it's just not just putting $50 in your pocket. It's that, it's making sure that you've got other things in place, whatever it is that you can do. Taking yourself on a holiday, taking yourself out, go and do a roar and snore at the zoo. It's hilarious.
Yeah, honestly, that sounds great. I like the 52 dates. I think, I have to do
Yeah,
that. I know I'm on your email newsletter, and I know so I think if for other people too, if they want that, that's a great thing to go grab.
yeah,
What
yeah.
about from a coaching perspective and working with people, like have you observed any just psychological benefits among different individuals who travel more frequently?
Yes, I think, it's when we get so wrapped up, and this isn't to negate anybody's trauma or any difficulty that somebody might be going through, but when we're only focused on that, we lose perspective, and it's about changing perspective and getting out of our single perspective. Like, oh, if I'm like I was in COVID and in the small bedroom unit that I had and just kind of going, oh, this is just getting me down. I'm getting depressed because I'm not interacting. I'm not looking at other people. I'm not getting out of that situation. And so it becomes my only perspective, first person perspective. So, I would say, right, I'm going to go down to the spinal ward at the hospital and just have a walk around and really kind of go, I think I've got it bad. There's some people that I've
Yeah.
really got it and just
Mhm.
kind of shift perspectives a little bit. And so, yeah, sorry, I forgot your question. What was your question?
No, I just said just any psychological benefits who travel
Yeah.
frequently.
Yes, so changing perspectives, that's right. Just to be able to get out there and immerse yourself with somebody else because you're taking the focus off of yourself and that opens your perspective and with more awareness gives you more choice and so that you can choose how you're going to show up in the world. And so it'll just change so much for the better. I can't recommend it highly enough. It's just a beautiful, beautiful experience to engage with people. When I left the UK for the very first time, I was in my early 20s, and a friend of mine said something that I will never forget, that it doesn't matter where you go or who you meet in the world. Everybody you will meet, whether they're a 5-year-old child or an 80-year-old person, they will all have loved something, have lost something, and be fearful of something. And when you know that, you can connect with absolutely anybody on the planet with those three simple things. And so there's no need to be fearful of anybody. We've all got a beautiful intention. It just can sometimes manifest in different behaviors, but I don't believe that anyone acts with ill intent. They have a thinking process that is creating a behavior that might not be serving, but you can connect with anybody when you know those three things, I think.
Yeah, that's a great point. I like that a lot, and I think that's that's one common misconception that people who may not travel have is I don't, I'm if I am trying to go on an international trip from the United States, and just most of my listeners are from here, right? Like I don't know how to speak the language. What happens if this happens? This place is dangerous. This all of the kind of anxiety and thoughts of, oh my gosh, what if, what if, what if? But it's like, well, what if you don't take that trip? Like you're going to be in the same position and wondering and seeing others doing it. And again, once you go on one, you realize, oh, wow, mostly everyone is going to speak English. Also, now you have so many different tools, Google Translate, you have AI tools that you can use for that. Do a little bit of research prior to going so you know the common words. But a lot of the
Oh,
times, those countries are a lot more safe than where you might be living because
yes.
yeah, so it's like just but that perspective, right? Perspective is reality. And if you haven't done that and gone out of your comfort zone and realized that, you think all of those thoughts. And then, but that, I mean, that's a common misconception. And people
Yeah.
are overwhelmed, right? They are nervous. They don't have that confidence. And I think that's a perfect point and perfect answer is all
Mm.
perspective.
Yeah, it is all perspective. And I love what you say, when you talk about what if this happens or what if that happens, and I kind of go, well, what if it goes great?
Yeah.
What if it's amazing? What if it's fantastic? What if you have the best time of your life? So it's about flipping that narrative, that story that we tell ourselves, because that's that story that's creating the behaviors, it's creating my response to the world.
Hmm.
I had shared this the other day that if we have this thinking, we have this thought that I can't cope, we're gonna create an emotional response to that, which could be based in fear, right? So I can't cope, that's gonna trigger a fear. That fear is gonna then affect my physiology. I'm gonna have this, I can't speak. Maybe I've got knots in my stomach, maybe my breathing changes. It's gonna impact this like steps and stages and processes, right? Till eventually I'll create this behavior that I'm going to avoid that. I don't want to do that. And
Yeah.
so that's going to reconfirm the first thought, I can't cope, right? So you get
Yeah.
stuck in loop. And so it's about taking yourself out of that perspective. And you can only do that by removing yourself from the center of the universe and getting into somebody else's perspective. Go and see
Yeah.
somebody change it up.
Yeah, and no, but I mean that's these conversations are great because right for a lot of people it's that I can't, and this is one of my favorite things when I'm talking to someone and they say I can't because, and in my head I'm like, okay, that's an excuse. A
Yes.
lot of times I can't because, and it's flipping that to how can I, right? Like because thinking about okay, I can't go on this trip because, and then you're bringing
Right.
up a lot of excuses. It's like okay, how can I make this work, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's
What,
a lot of times
what
I
if you
can't.
could?
What's that?
What if you could go on the trip?
Yeah,
Just change it. Exactly.
yeah.
What if you could? Yeah.
Exactly. And it's just like, but it's then thinking, how can I? And then it's just, then you have to ask yourself, what maybe are some sacrifices, right? What can I say no to? What are my intentions, right? Going back to all of that and focusing on those things. And that's going to help you um, do that. And I think that's, go ahead. Sorry.
I think, yeah, no, you're right. I mean, and it's a great point you bring up. I think it's a very kind of either or thinking though. It's a kind of what black and white thinking, right? Why not have it all? Why not be able to have the third
Yeah.
thing? It's just both of that and the third thing, because we limit ourselves by that thinking. And ultimately, for all the worry that I've ever had about what if, when it actually eventuates, it was never ever what I ever imagined. So it doesn't matter how much time you spend worrying about the thing, whatever that thing is. Um, sorry, I'm just going to share with you. I was up on these pinnacles. I was in the middle of nowhere. I had this like 360-degree view of the ocean. It was just amazing. But I was miles away from anybody, any civilization. And in the morning, when I'm waking up and I'm making some coffee, this emu has poked its head around the side of the bed. And I'm not kidding. I had two wild emus just like giving all of this. Never in my wildest dreams would I have imagined that I would have been having breakfast with an emu. And then I started to think, oh my God, are they dangerous? Are they going to kick me? Are they going to do whatever? But these amazing experiences, I could never in my wildest dreams have imagined that. So, you know.
That's, but those things don't happen if you're not traveling. So
That's right. That's
it's
so
very,
right.
it's so true. I think one thing I want to know, and for listeners too, is a lot of the times, it's getting over that hump of, okay, I'm going to go on the trip. But then once you get there, it's like a lot of times people are overwhelmed with, okay, what do I pack, right? How long do
Mhm.
I go? What about like
Mhm.
the airport? What about, so it's a lot of those type of questions. But then if you've done it once, if you've done it twice, even if for that first time, it's always good to have some different mindful practices that you
Mm.
can have while you're on that trip that are going to enhance wellness, whether that's, just eating right, whether that's walking, whatever that may be. But I'm just curious from your perspective, like, are there any tips that you have that you do or that you coach your clients on?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think I try to keep an open mind, you know. I think if I could use this metaphor, it might not be kind of answering your question. It might be a bit of a way around it. But if I've got somebody who I'm coaching and they're having real difficulty processing reality, like the reality is telling them one thing, but they're holding on to how it should be. It's as if, I use this metaphor. It's like I've got a map of Sydney or maybe a map of New York or something, and that's my reality. That's made up of all of my experiences, all of my beliefs, all of my life experiences. This map that I'm referencing on how I show up in the world. And suddenly I get taken off to, I don't know, LA, and I'm trying to navigate around LA with my map of New York. And so some of the buildings are going to be the same. Some of the street names might even be the same. It's kind of looking the same, but eventually I'm going to get a bit frustrated because my map isn't what's happening in reality, right? And so it's just to bring awareness to that. If there's triggering or if you're being triggered, if there's frustration arising, how much are you trying to enforce your map on reality? Because that's going to create so much suffering. And so to let go of that and be open to, okay, I've got to let go of this map. This map isn't
Yeah.
working in this situation, right? Because this map is useless here. And so it's not to say that your experiences are useless, but they might not be so resourceful for you in that moment. And to be open to accepting and embracing a different reality, a different way. That might be, eating food from a leaf, a banana leaf, if you're going to Bali, or, just
Yeah.
exploring different things.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I mean, that's one of my favorite things, and one thing that when we went on group trips, like it was cool to see friends who had never traveled internationally trying all these different foods who were just simple, hey, I'll take a Caesar salad and French fries type of people. And they were
Yeah.
then trying, right? We're on the coast of Croatia eating fresh fish.
Oh,
We're in
yeah.
Budapest, Prague, eating their class, their dishes, and just seeing them try that was pretty cool. But
Yeah.
I think that's one thing as you start to travel more, it's don't, you can have a good plan, but also leave time
Sure.
to explore, right? You want to have a plan to see a few things that you want to see, and right. So
Yeah.
but
Sensible.
you,
Be,
but
be sensible, you
yeah,
know.
but you want to have time to be spontaneous and learn about the culture because a lot of times those are some of the funnest days where you have one of those one or two open days where in that way you aren't trying to have everything planned to a T of every second. And that's one thing when I started planning trips I struggled with because it was like we got to do this, and this, and over time you learn like that's just it's one exhausting, and two you don't get to take in the culture and you don't get to experience right the actual city. So I mean, as people
So
start,
true.
definitely build that in if you are building out trip plans, itineraries, whatever that may be. Like that's definitely a lesson I've taken, and I'm sure you have as well.
Yeah, 100%. I remember very much in the early days when we'd have the Lonely Planet, and I'd
Yeah.
be on the plane going through and looking at all the checkpoints of all the things that all the temples, all the places that I'd had to see. And I spent all the time running around trying to see all these things and then be moving on to the next place and just feel like I didn't stop to really take it in. I was just on this mission. And
Yeah.
really feel like yeah, it was a wasted opportunity. I mean, yeah, I went and saw these temples and I did that, but yeah, it wasn't how I would do it now. So I think, but I needed to have that experience to be able to understand that's not how I want to do it. But have a checklist,
Yeah.
do some common sense things. So, make sure you go and see the thing you want to see, but enjoy it, savor it, sit down, immerse yourself in it a little bit longer and yeah.
Yeah, I just finalized our honeymoon itinerary and it's pretty chill and laid back, I will say. I was looking at them like, wow, this
Going.
is like there's and when we're in Bangkok, we're there for a day. We're gonna do most of the stuff. And then in Chiang
Have you
Mai,
been there before? Have you been
I
to Bangkok?
no, I've never been to Thailand. I've never been to Bali. So yeah, yeah.
Have a banana pancake from one of the street stalls. There's lots of
Okay.
street like vans that travel around. Have a banana pancake. They're fantastic.
Okay, good. That's good to know. But yeah, most of it honestly is just it's pretty relaxed and chill, and there's a few things we want to do, but it's not like, all right, we have 2.5 weeks of we're doing every little thing. It's like I'm thinking, wow, we're really gonna chill. We don't have much on the agenda, which is great because we can just go have a fun vacation.
And did you say you're going to Chiang Mai? Did you
Yeah,
say that?
Chiang
Yeah.
Mai, yep,
And what else?
Phuket, PP Islands, and yeah,
Oh,
Bali. Yeah, so
beautiful.
we're excited. So
Oh,
I'll have
beautiful.
yeah, yeah. I'll have a lot of good lessons learned, experiences, some content I'll be able to give everyone who tunes in, and yeah, some podcast episodes, blogs to help people who are wanting to go.
It's a little, I don't know if this is a plug for this app, but the app that I use traveling around Australia is it's an app where every time you take a photograph, it plots it on the GPS of wherever you're going. And so it kind of feels a little bit like you're being stalked initially, but it's a fantastic app because now I've got this incredible map of all the places. So I would strongly recommend if you're going, it's
Yeah.
called PolarSteps.
Okay.
I think there's a plug for the app, but yeah, it's a fantastic app. It really is. It just tracks where you're going. You've got the choice of which photo to put up, but it prompts you and says, you're leaving Chiang Mai or you're leaving Phuket. Do you want to put these photos up? And it's just a fantastic memory. And you can make them into a book at the end of it. It will give you the option to kind of collate everything of where you've been. It's a fantastic little app. It's great.
Okay. Cool. Well, I will definitely download it.
Yeah.
Well, Zara, I appreciate you coming on. This was great. I learned a ton. Hopefully, our listeners did as well. And just on getting out, taking that trip, understanding how that's going to impact you from a personal wellness journey. But just if listeners do want to find you and learn more, what would the best way to do that?
Yeah. So, yeah, thanks, Mike. So it's my confidence coach, all one word, .com.au because I'm in Australia. And I'm running next week, for the first time. I'm going to start these weekly conversations with people who are running a little bit of anxiety, not necessarily with traveling, but just anxiety potentially in their relationships and at work. And so it's a free conversation. You can find all the details on my website. And so I'm inviting listeners if they want to come and just join that conversation. It's free. But if you want to get in touch with me in any way, it'll be on the website. And obviously, I'd love to share my ebooks with you.
Hmm.
Um, and you'll be able to sort of see secondhand my photographic journey of where I went in Australia, if anyone's keen.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Listeners, we'll share all that in the show notes. And if you have any questions for her or want to connect, click on those links or reach out to her. And we really appreciate you coming on again, Zara, and listeners for tuning in. Make sure if you like the episode, you give it a 5-star review, share it with a friend or family member so they can travel more. And if you are wanting to travel and learn a little bit more, but don't know where to start, we also have a stress-free travel starter kit on our website, so you can go download that. And appreciate everyone tuning in. Thanks again, Zara.
Ah, awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Ruth.